The market is being absolutely rocked right now as the world reacts to President Trump's tariff position. Things are changing by the minute. We won't know how this will shake out, but so far we've had over 50 countries have called to negotiate. Taiwan, India, Israel, Vietnam, and Cambodia have agreed to drop all tariffs on the United States. The EU came out with a statement saying they're ready to negotiate, but China, the big one, is so far standing firm, saying it will impose an additional 34% tariff on all imported US products starting April 10th. Trump just responded. We have one of the most experienced supply chain experts with us today to explain what this all means and how it might impact Tesla. Jeff Lutz, ex-CVP of Supply Chain and Chief Quality Officer, now CEO of his own supply chain consulting firm. Thank you, Jeff. This is really important and so happy to have you here. I think there's really a small group of people who know exactly what's going on and how this might impact some of the big companies. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, I have a few opinions on things, Herbert, and if you've seen my X post, and I would just say is one of the things that people just aren't talking about is the impact of supply, and that's what we're going to get into in a bit, because I think it's going to be an angle on this issue that just is not discussed. And finally, I am speaking from a lot of experience dealing with trade and distributed product in over 150 countries, set up manufacturing in more than a dozen, and literally built factories in multiple countries and done many of these large scale negotiations. So I'm happy to take questions too from people as well later on, but let's just get into it. I'll give you my perspective.
No, this is good. You are honestly got the experience, and I think there's a lot missing in this negotiation that's happening right now, which is, people who've actually built products. Elon also replied, and we'll listen to what he's saying as well as your comments. So, let's start off with the idea that this tariff, situation that we're in right now, it is not something that's theoretical. It's not something that we're waiting for in the future. You've got this post that you replied to. This person, Ryan Peterson, said 28%. Oh, I guess he works for Flexport, right? 28% of the customers in Flexports, he's the CEO, and 28% of his customers called down yesterday said they're pausing all ocean freight bookings from Asia until there's more clarity on where tariffs will end up. It's happening. There's a huge group of customers that's already saying, hey, we got to stop any kind of ocean freight bookings. You said, reminder, this is reality on the ground, not a projection, not a scare tactic. Factories will go line down as a result.
Yeah. Let me be very specific. So Flexport's a logistics provider. Think, in import, export, setting up those travel lanes, could be by ship, could be by air, and so forth. And what Ryan is saying in that clip is basically more than a quarter of bookings. These were bookings set up to depart were canceled. They were basically put on pause. And we're seeing right now with container rates too, is we're seeing container rates. This is the cost for container of shipping. They're going way down as well. There's basically availability opening up. People aren't shipping. So when you have uncertainty in supply chain, when you have tariffs, which by the way, I support, and we'll get into more details. I do support a tariff regimen. I do support driving for fair trade. I do support aggressive negotiation tactics, but we have to be smart. In this situation right now, while we have leverage in terms of the other nations being surplus nations, meaning we're taking on more of their product, it would be a big deal for them and their economies if we took less of their product. That is all true, and that economic theory holds. But the other side of that economic theory is about supply. And in the U.S., we have factories. We have factory lines all over the place. This belief that we don't manufacture anything here is absolutely incorrect. We have millions and millions of people building product and assembling product here. We have the current state today is we have a globalized supply chain, right, wrong, or indifferent. I've preached on this show endlessly the importance of localization of supply chain, and what Tesla is doing is a great example of that. That is the way to go, but that takes many years of engineering both of your product and your supply chain to get there. The current situation today, though, is many of these companies that are assembling product in the U.S. today and employing hundreds, if not thousands of people, are dependent on components that come both from within the U.S. but from all over the world, and even suppliers that are in the U.S. that are feeding these final factories in the U.S. They're dependent on components that are coming and maybe raw materials. Maybe it's a piece of felt, maybe it's a piece of graphite, maybe it's some raw material, maybe it's resin, you name it. It's coming from other geographies. And when all of those geographies concurrently are hit with extremely high tariffs, it's not a matter of, oh, just go into the CBP system, the Customs and Border Patrol, update the tariff, numbers, which, by the way, that's a huge, huge undertaking. It's not a matter of that. There's an importer, there's an exporter, and then there's an end customer. And all the situations are going to be different. So when you hear people say that, the tariffs are going to be paid by the customer, that is incorrect. That is not universally true. If you have market dynamics that are very high demand and you have price elasticity, you can raise the price of your product in the market and still do okay in that situation. If you don't have that elasticity and demand and you can't take a price increase on the end product, then the manufacturer and or the importer, the exporter will share that tariff burden. It's on a case-by-case basis. But what you have now are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of components that all have to go through this individual conversation of, if I have a tariff on that's 30%, what does it do to my business case if I have to take on 10% of that or 15% of that? And you just have this negotiation going back and forth between importer, exporter. The market will speak. As soon as that product is put on for sale at a different price, the market will speak. By the way, not to get too complex, but the exporter is also looking at that data, that market data. And sometimes they will second guess the importer and say, yep, I understand what you're trying to do with this negotiation, but I don't think your customers are going to buy it at that price. I'm just going to allocate away from you. So now take this situation and multiply it by thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of components. This is what's happening right now. Heads of companies, chief supply chain, other executives, I've been on the phone the last several days. I've been in this position before, by the way, and we're having the conversations. I'm not going to talk about any of the conversations. I will just tell you, number one, they cannot speak openly on television. Why can't they speak openly on television or print or on social media? The reason is they're party to these negotiations right now, so they can't reveal anything. The second thing is nobody wants to upset the government on either side. So you're going to have a weird situation here right now where you have certain basically calamity happening right now in terms of, are we going to, our suppliers going to ship? Our importers going to import? That is happening right now. Is it universal? No. I want to talk a bit about like Tesla, for example, and then we can go to a couple of examples in a bit. Tesla will have a smaller list here to deal with. It's not puny, it's not minuscule, but relative to all the other auto manufacturers, they have a smaller list to deal with in terms of these concerns. They have $38 billion of cash. So they can have a conversation with their supply base that says, look, I'm expecting you to take on a tremendous amount of burden because the demand for EVs is tremendous. We have the market. If we share the burden, we're going to be fine, and we're going to work through this over the next 30 days. And they'll put together some deal. Tesla can fund part of it. Suppliers can fund some part of it. It'll be different by component, but Tesla can manage this stuff. But not every factory can do that. And this is where business cases get turned upside down. If you have too much imported content, you're, number one, the negotiations are going to take a long time. Number two, you may not have you may flip the business case upside down for your product in the US that you're building, or the business case for them to export may get flipped upside down as they just say, I'm not shipping. And this, if we go to the next couple of examples here with Audi and with Boeing, so Audi, so this is at the finished goods level. We knew this was going to be an issue. there's several dozen cars, by the way, that are fully built outside of the United States and imported to the US. This is just one example. Land Rover as well, Jaguar Land Rover also went on pause. And this is basically like, hey, look, we're in this uncertain period here. Just hold. We're not saying we're shutting down the product line, we're holding. And when we're holding, there's somebody on the other side that wants product that needs to build it and can't. In this situation, this would be, an end dealership to an end customer. So anyway, this is just one example. If we go to my, I think I have a post, okay. This is another one. This is helmet. This is one of by the way, if you look at the Boeing, I should have sent a diagram of the Boeing supply chain is, to me, overly globalized. I mean, this is something that really needs to be looked at from a national security perspective. I'm sure they are. I'm sure they're very smart people, but the components for Boeing are just, they're coming from all over the place and in a very high percentage and high dollar content coming from all over the place. So this is one of their suppliers. And they're based in, I think Helmet's based in Pittsburgh, but they've got inbound material and raw materials coming from abroad. And they're like, look, we're flipped upside down on this. And so they're declaring something called, force majeure, which I'm not going to get into the full legal explanation of it, but it's essentially this exogenous event that prevents the business relationship from continuing. So now you're in a situation. What does Elon always say? I've said this multiple times. What does he always say? All it takes is one part to take your product line down. And this one part, if they don't resolve this issue, which I'm sure they're negotiating right now, will take their whole product line down. They won't be able to build planes.
Yeah. So you said this will happen times 100, hundreds of thousands of components used in U.S. factories. We're tariffing things we cannot readily make. Big mistake. And I support tariffs to drive trade fairness, but they have to be applied correctly. I'll ask you shortly after we cover a few more topics here, what is your suggestion? But so far right now, this is happening. It's impacting companies now. Huge supply shock coming if this continues.
Yeah. So one thing is to realize that the people that do these negotiations on trade. This is a vicious negotiation. This is a big deal. These are big dollars. So you can't come in these negotiations and not know what you're talking about. And one of the thing, and this whole thing of like acting crazy, I think it's okay in some parts, but to tariff things that you can't physically build at T=0 or T=1 month or 2 months, right. Incredibly stupid, because the people on the other end of the conversation know you can't do it, and therefore they have leverage over you. They know you're asking for something that you can't back up, and then they'll use it as leverage over you to say, fine, I'm just not going to do the deal. So this whole thing that we're doing right now of tariffing things that we physically cannot make today is a problem. You're saying, well, what would you do? First off, I support tariffs. I support doing free, all-encompassing trade too, real free trade, tariffs, non-tariffs. I support doing all of that. But you have to do it on an aggressive, agreeable schedule. Get the best. I am shocked. I know there's phone calls happening with CEOs. I'm shocked that there's not a consortium of supply chain engineering czars that are sitting around saying, all right, we understand what the president wants. This is how we would do it in reality. This is how we would make this product in the US that's not made today. Here's an aggressive schedule for how to do it. We don't do our engines and transmissions for automobiles today. This is the reason why. This is the current cost structure at $2 to $10 an hour right now in Mexico to do it. This is the labor content. This is what the future product would look like. Here are the feature value trade-offs required to build this product. Here's the engineering plan. Here's the supply chain design to be able to do this in the United States. Here's the time frame to do it. And then, you know what, we can say like we want to cut that time frame 20 or 30. That's fine. Be super aggressive on everything. But when you set things at T=0 on things you can't do, you are straining credulity. You are entering into a negotiation with people that know you can't build what you're tariffing, and they can just dig their heels in.
Whoa. Okay. No wonder you're getting phone calls. You know this inside and out. But some people are saying that this is just the way that President Trump is negotiating. And that what he's actually doing is, going out global. But we already saw over 50 countries capitulate and basically say, "Hey, we want to negotiate with you," as he wanted. Now the one last country standing is China. Even Europe will cover that. Basically, came out and said that they're willing to negotiate. So you've got here the latest.
Well,
Of
Herbert,
course,
let's
China.
pause for a second. First off, I am a fan of driving this conversation and what his intent is. The issue is what I described earlier of tariffing things you can't make. And the 50 countries, if they're offering 0 tariff levels, that was a very quick thing to do. The question is what are the non-tariff barriers? Okay. And we don't know what those are. And so if we, instead of doing this 100, 200 country thing, if we would have focused on certain supply lanes from the EU, from Asia, non-China Asia countries, China and Canada and Mexico, I think we would have solved 85% of this problem. Okay. But that's fine. We're going about it a different way. But it's really clear to say the measure of success, there's going to be words that come out of the White. That's basically there's no chance that this is not going to be deemed a success by the White House. The question is between now and that point in time, what underlying damage is physically done? And what I'm worried about is every hour, that Audi example, that helmet example with Boeing, there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of examples of components not shipping. If they don't ship when the factories here need them, the lines here are going to go down and people are going to be furloughed. When people are furloughed, they're thrown out of the factory and they're not paid. There's different arrangements, but then furloughs can, if it extends longer, could extend into layoffs. And this also gives companies time to look at the market and say, well, if people aren't spending, maybe I don't actually even need to bring those furloughed people back. So I'm very worried about specifically the supply chain disruption. And I'm worried that the White House is thinking in these big theoretical chunks of like game theory, economic theory, debtor nation, and so forth. Meanwhile, those hundreds of thousands of components aren't shipping. So what we don't know, Herbert, what you and I don't know, is maybe they have an end game in mind over the next 24 to 48 hours. And maybe the damage is limited. But I see people coming on X talking about weeks and months. And I'm just telling you that it only takes one component to take a manufacturing line down. That manufacturing line employs hundreds, if not thousands of people in the US. So we have to be careful and understand where we have points of leverage.
Yeah, that's a very good point. We need to reiterate that, it's one thing to do something like this, but it needs to be resolved quicker than later. But this is what I think we're hoping, right? That's the best case outcome. You've got Donald Trump reacting right away to China, saying that they're going to increase their tariffs 34% on top of their already record-setting tariffs. He replied saying, "Okay, if you do that," he says basically here, if China does not withdraw its 34% increase above their already long-term trading abuses by tomorrow, April 8th, the U.S. will impose additional tariffs on China 50% effective April 9th. You can see he's going strong and ridiculous. Additionally, all talks with China concerning their requested meetings with us will be terminated. Negotiations with other countries, which have also requested meetings, will begin taking place immediately. Thank you for attention to this matter. China before in March actually said, if war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, a trade war, or any other type of war, we're ready to fight till the end. That's strong words on both sides here. You said this, anyone who has successfully negotiated with China knows this is not how you negotiate with China to make effective gains. The India, Vietnam, Taiwan leverage approach, along with Canada, Mexico, would be far more effective because all these guys have already kind of ready to negotiate. Congress should intervene today. You said an India deal, Taiwan, Vietnam would place severe leverage over China. This is the way. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean the whole way that, again, it's difficult. I mean, it's difficult when you're not a part, and I want to give respect to the process. But what concerns me is I've never seen a negotiation in Asia go well when you go over and you punch people in the mouth. It doesn't work. There's this whole concept and whole culture of saving face in Asia. And there's a way to get the results you want, and there's a way to be tough without without putting it on display for millions and millions of people like that. There's a way to do it where you get the exact same results, where you're super effective, but you don't come off as just like a tough guy. It doesn't translate. It doesn't work in that culture. They'll dig in. They'll recognize proper tradecraft. They'll recognize if you understand what you own, if you understand what you're capable of building, and you understand what they're doing, and you describe it and you articulate it very properly. If you can describe both sides of this deal effectively, they'll understand it and they'll respect it. They don't respond well to being punched in the mouth publicly. So something may happen. They may even, by the way, if you look at the responses from China on all of our tariffs, going even up to 54%, we're going up 54% on $350 to $400 billion of imports that we do. They're at 34% on $148 billion of import. This is what people don't understand. That was not a proportional response from China. It's in terms of total goods affected, that's not a proportional response. And by the way, I'm not caring why. To have the toughest negotiation in the world with China, I'm all for it. What I'm not all for is an ineffective negotiation. And this feels like right now it's ineffective. What would I have done? Number one, I would have got the tax cuts done first before facing this off. Number two, I would have got Canada, Mexico done and had a strong North America alliance. Okay. And number three, I would have gone after this Asia cluster of countries, Taiwan, Vietnam, obviously India would be huge. And you put all of those together and you have tremendous, and still China is still in an interesting spot because we are beholden. Those are the facts right now. They have all of our supply chain right now, and we don't have the cards here right now. So this is I would say it's a very precarious situation we're in right now. And we'll see what happens. By the way, on the side, we're negotiating a BlackRock deal with them. We're negotiating a TikTok deal. I mean, this is, a bit bizarre in terms of like everything that's happening at the same time, but, let that be. I'm just talking about in general, doing high-level negotiations with China in Asia, punching them in the mouth publicly is not an approach to achieve fast, effective results. Going at the other Asia countries, having Canada, Mexico, and by the way, having your tax deal done, you're hanging your companies out right now. You're telling your companies, your major companies who said that they're going to invest in the U.S., oh, by the way, your components are now 100% more expensive until you bring up your capacity here in the U.S. What are you doing? I mean, you're effectively bankrupting them. The patient comes in for an appendicitis and you saw them in half to take it out. That's what you're doing. So I think this needs to be relooked at, not being emotional. I'm just drawing on experience of having these negotiations at different levels in the past. Anyway, we'll see a couple more clips that to me concern me about our approach to negotiation. We have people that don't know what we're capable of building today in the U.S. and don't understand the timelines for how to get to it.
Yeah, I like your stepwise recommendation that solve the tax first, get the North American alliance resolved or at least negotiated, get the Asian countries, and then you got choice and you got a leverage against China. The good news is we got Europe, and then we're going to get to what actually Elon Musk, who's built things, what he thinks. So you've got European Union says they're ready to negotiate with the U.S., says they've offered 0 for 0 tariffs. The announcement was made by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and Europe is always ready for a good deal, so we keep it on the table. And let's listen to what she said here.
And ready to negotiate with the United States. Indeed, we have offered 0 for 0 tariffs for industrial goods, as we have successfully done with many other trading partners, because Europe is always ready for a good deal. So we keep it on the table. But we are also prepared to respond through countermeasures and defend our interests.
And then over the weekend, not only was Elon Musk was in Italy, and he had an exchange with Peter Navarro, who's the senior counselor for trade for the U.S. administration right now. He said a PhD in econ from Harvard is a bad thing, not a good thing. Results in ego and brains, much more than one problem. Greater than, I don't know what he said here, greater than one problem. Meaning getting things done, I think 0 to 1. Navarro is 100% correct. PhD or no PhD here. Just been obsessed with trade for quite a while. And then Elon replies saying he ain't built shit. Let's listen to Navarro.
I think from policy institutes on both sides of the aisle, the methodology that was used has been universally derided as being non-serious. I don't know whether you know exactly who came up with the formula, but it allowed you to at least characterize most of these countries as being their tariffs well above the reality of the situation, so that when you say that we're going to do half on them, it was much higher than anyone anticipated. And I think you'd have to concede that this was not the market reaction you were looking for. There's a way of maybe incrementally trying to accomplish some of the things that the president wants to do in a reasonable, serious way. And this just almost across the board has caused what you're seeing in the stock market, and a lot of head scratching and head shaking on whether anyone really knows what they're doing in this case. Peter, right, well, can you at least acknowledge that?
Sure. No, I can't, because here's what I'm seeing. You're throwing a lot of stuff at me. First of all, the methodology was perfectly sound. It was done by the Council of Economic Advisors based on long-term studies that are in the academic literature. And the people taking pot shots at us are the same people that always take pot shots
the American
on us.
Enterprise Institute, Peter.
Of course. Joe, come on. The American Enterprise Institute.
Yeah, he's talking about
Peter, let me ask
the literature.
Elon Musk, who the president has described as a genius repeatedly, basically came out over the weekend and said that he at least implied two things. One, that he's not in favor of these tariff program the way it's structured currently, suggesting he wants it, he wants 0-0 across the board. But he also took a shot at you and took a shot at you personally. Have you spoken to him?
No, but we'll speak. I'll probably see him today in the Oval. It's no big deal. Here's the thing. It's like Elon
But what do you tell Elon? Why is he, if Elon's against this, then he's so
again,
smart?
let me finish. Let me finish here. I'm just about to tell you. Look, Elon Musk and his Doge team is making a contribution to America in terms of waste, fraud, and abuse. And that's a very good thing for this country and the American people. But he's not a car manufacturer. He's a car assembler in many cases. If you go to his Texas plant, a good part of the engines that he gets, which in the EV case is the batteries, come from Japan and come from China. The electronics come from Taiwan. The tires come. What we want, and the difference is in our thinking and Elon's on this, is that we want the tires made in Akron.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Called a battery pack an engine. At one point, he said the transmissions aren't made here. These are not serious people. The automobile industry and EVs are a major industry. And if you're the trade representative, you should know everything upside down. You should know it inside out. You should know every detail. You should understand the exploded diagram of how the product is made. You should understand the value-added cost structure, and you should understand this in great detail. You should know it for semiconductor. You should know it for auto. You should know it for airplanes. You should know it for the major. You should know it for smartphone. You should know it for the major industries that you're sitting down in front of these trade representatives and having the conversation. Because I guarantee you that they know their side of what they're building and what they're doing. So when you get on national TV and you start talking about transmissions for EVs and you start talking about the battery pack as the engine, it's nonsensical. And the battery packs for Teslas in the United States are assembled in the United States. Okay. And so, yes, does Tesla import components, various electrical components from outside of the United States? Yes. They're not built here in volume at the right price structure. Otherwise, they would, because Tesla has vertically integrated every other element of their supply chain in their factories. Do they move things in and out? Absolutely, that they do. But you will not find an automobile manufacturer in the United States that is more highly vertically integrated than Tesla. That is a fact. And quite frankly, throughout the world, you may not find one that is more vertically integrated. There may be some exceptions here or there. Obviously, what BYD is doing with their own battery packs is an advantage for them. But in terms of this on a global scale, having this conversation, by the way, Tesla makes their own battery packs now, and they're getting to scale in their own design. But let's put that to the side for a bit. When you're the trade representative and you have to sit down in front of other trade and have these negotiations, you have to know what you're talking about. And it really ruins your credibility when you get on TV and you say things like this, because how do I believe that you know anything else? And now I'm concerned, like, you're representing our country. I'm concerned that they actually don't know what they're talking about. And this gets back to my original point. We are tariffing things that we cannot build at T equals 0 today. T equals 0 means time. Time equals 0 means today. We are tariffing things that we cannot build. And when you tariff something that you cannot build, you are fundamentally either bankrupting your importer, or raising the price for you as the manufacturer, or raising the price for the consumer of the outbound product, or all of the above. That doesn't help anybody. What it would help everyone is doing these tariffs. You say, Jeff, what are you suggesting? You're just saying that they're doing everything wrong. You're not giving me the suggestion. Here are the suggestions. Go industry by industry, category by category. Do sector level tariffs. Do them on a schedule. Do them on a schedule based on our capability today and when we'll get ramped up to full capability in the United States. Be selective on what we tariff. We do not want to tariff things that we have no intention of ever building again. We do not want to make T-shirts and Nike and other things like that. We have to be careful about which items we tariff. What is manufacturing in the future? What do we want to be building in the future? I don't think we want to be building television sets here. I do think other forms of consumer electronics that have transmit receive capability, that have, complexity that kind of steps us into humanoid robots, I think there is some value in that. But we should be sitting down and having those conversations. Right now, we are tariffing everything. And that works for over a weekend, maybe a 24, 40-hour thing of like, let me sound crazy over a weekend. My warning is that if this continues and this goes over many days, those ships that we just talked about, those container freight, they're not leaving with the parts that are needed for factories here. And this is the reason why, if you unlock all of this and you look at it in totality, this is why the US, Canada, Mexico auto tariffs and the component tariffs went on and off 2 or 3 times. This is the reason why. We are tariffing things that we know we cannot build today. And Mexico knows that. So I think the whole approach to the negotiation is flawed. And you can disagree, and anybody can disagree with me. That's fine. I'm just lending my opinion here. But this is why those tariffs came on and off. And this is why, by the way, I think these tariffs are going to come off at some point in the near future too, because they don't work. My only concern is how much damage is going to be done in terms of supply between now and then. And you might say, well, Jeff, it's worth it if we get all these zero tariffs. I'm saying you could get the zero tariff negotiations done with an escalating tariff schedule. You could get the same results and go after the non-tariff barriers. So I am being highly critical of the approach. I am not highly critical of going after our trading partners and getting fair trade. Finally, this commentary of going after reparations because we've been unfairly treated for 50 years. Again, if that's part of the thing to sound crazy, we'll park it in the part of the thing to sound crazy in a negotiation. That's fine. We're just not going to dissect everything here. I just honestly want us focused on the facts, the mechanics of the supply chain, and how these things work in terms of who has the burden.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I hope a lot of important people are watching the show now. You're sounding very similar to what Elon is thinking. He knows, he's built stuff like you have, and he's hopefully talking to Trump right now. There's this rumor this morning, the market's just going crazy. Trump is considering a 90-day pause in tariffs for all countries except China. That rumor came out. Rumors emerge of 90-day tariff pause. CNBC reports it. S&P 500 adds $3 trillion from low of day, and then all of a sudden they report that the White House said they're unaware of this. White House calls tariff pause fake news, and it falls back. So, this idea of a 90-day tariff pause, I think is probably very likely true, but they immediately shut it down. The other thing is Taiwan is they came out and they said, hey, this is we're going to go and negotiate to the zero tariff. This is a good news. That Taiwan is very critical for that, right? So let's watch this.
It goes back to the conversation
USTR last night that more than 50 countries have reached out to the president to begin a negotiation. But they're doing that because they understand that they bear a lot of the tariff. And so I don't think that you're going to see a big effect on the consumer in the U.S. because I do think that the reason why we have a persistent long-run trade deficit is these people have very inelastic supply. They've been dumping goods into the country in order to create jobs, say, in China.
Yeah, but I think Taiwan is obviously very, very strategically important for the chips, silicon, and others. But it's good news.
Well, then they're carved out right away too. So the
chips are
the semiconductors carved out. Data center is not fully carved out. So it's debatable. Some people are looking at this. Some people are saying it's carved out in Mexico, where we do data center production in Mexico. We got to be careful because we are importing large systems, large elements of the data center from Taiwan. So we just have to be like, are we going to limit our scaling of AI? We just have to be careful in what we're doing here. But yeah, this whole thing of this cluster of countries getting this together and then facing off with China, that's a very smart approach. I totally applaud it. I'm totally behind it. But we've got to get moving. We've got to get supply flowing again. And this concern, I heard Kramer this morning of Vietnam is just a dumping ground for China. That's true 20 years ago. It is controllable. If we hire auditors, if we have Vietnam fund there are things that are controllable or manageable, but we have people sitting behind desks who have literally just not done anything and just throwing these superlatives out. It's there's things that are controllable and there's things that are not controllable. We should definitely be going after deals with these countries and then pulling them together to go after China. But again, go after and get meaningful results. By the way, we talk about the 2018 tariffs. I wrote an article about this. We had 2018 tariffs on China, and we're like, oh, this was successful, and we didn't have inflation. There's a reason. China didn't end up buying a bunch of our ag. They did a couple of buys, both soybeans and other parts of ag, but they never did the full purchase. We had to go in and helicopter, I think, $28 billion to our farmers because we cut them off from exports with these tariffs in the China. So if anybody went and looked at the results of the 2018 tariffs from this administration, I would think if they looked at them in totality, they would be an abject failure. The trade deficit grew and China didn't buy the stuff that we wanted them to buy in continuity. And now we're sitting here today threatening 105% tariffs. If what worked in 2018 worked, we wouldn't be sitting here today threatening to shut down our inbound supply chain because we want to go to this 105% tariff. Remember, I am someone who's been supportive of this administration. So I'm coming at this pretty objective in terms of my comments here. And I'm trying to call balls and strikes on this. We really have to be careful with this approach. And now we're doing it. It's Monday. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday now in Asia. We're now going several days now of not loading container ships. We've got, again, it's not going to be, by the way, there's inventory in the US. It's going to be a mixed bag. Some assembly lines are going to be fine. They may be fine through the whole thing. Some are hand to mouth though. And we may start seeing this. And again, you're already starting to see these force majeure events, and where suppliers just aren't shipping. You're going to see those trickling out every day.
Did you want to talk about the iPhone?
I'll just briefly touch on it a bit. This is from my industry. I'm just seeing most about 80 or 95% of what I'm seeing posted on X about building a smartphone in the United States is wrong. I don't know who's been contracted to do these analysis, but these are not. It doesn't appear. I would throw these analysis out if they were presented to me. And the reason is it doesn't appear that they were made by people that understand the end state. And the end state here is you would not build an iPhone or a smartphone the way you build it in China today. You would change the design of the product. You would change the design of the manufacturing system, and you would approach the layering of the supply chain in an effective way. And you would also layer your negotiations with the host government and tell them what you're doing, why you're doing it, and either get manufacturing credits or get some sort of tariff carve-outs and show them your over-encompassing plan. Nobody in their right mind would move tier 1 to tier 7 of the iPhone supply chain here day one and say, you're on your own. That's not how this would work. The other thing is there's people talking about billions of dollars of CapEx. Who do you think owns the CapEx today in Asia that are building these products? I'm not going to get into confidential. All I will say is that a lot of that CapEx is already owned by the people that you think need to go out and buy more CapEx. Now, the CapEx will be different. The manufacturing system will be different in terms of how you would approach it in the US. And yes, there will be incremental CapEx, but there is a lot of owned CapEx that's already out there that's doing this volume today. Finally, these companies are not going to approach it this way. They're not going to say, oh, I guess I got to do all my iPhones. What they're going to do is they're going to raise prices in the non-tariff countries and in the US, and they're going to go to their supply base and negotiate with them, and they're going to go figure out how to drive, efficiencies. If you're dealing with a 10% tariff and you can drive 5% COGS out of your product, you're going to cut into this burden pretty quickly. And then if you can raise prices in non-tariff countries, there's an approach to this that has not been properly articulated. That's fine. That's fine. I'm just saying that a lot of the stuff you're seeing is a bit hyper. I would challenge it.
Thank you, Jeff. Well, what a very important show today. Appreciated your feedback. You're one of the few people that know this really well. I hope that important people are watching this show, and certainly hope that Elon will have his ability to influence, and he's built things. He knows what a lot of things you've talked about. He might know some of it. Appreciate you, Jeff.
He knows all of it. He knows. Of course he does. Yeah. Elon totally gets it. There are plenty of people out there, by the way, of people out there that get this. And like I said, we can be supportive of the end goal.
Yeah.
And supportive. I'm supportive of the aggressive tactics too. Some of them you just have to be selective. And I summarize it with, we have to be careful and tariff what we know how to build right now and be aggressive about what we want to build in the future.
Great comment. Follow Jeff on his X account at the Jeff Lutz. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.